Ethan Vance, a man who had meticulously maintained his impeccable reputation for over 2 decades, found himself completely captivated by another man's spouse at the elegant charity gala. His deeply ingrained principles, honed as a leading figure in his field, dictated that such desires were off-limits. Yet, Julian Reed possessed an unparalleled grace and allure, while his husband, Brendan Shaw, a man of limited vision, openly dismissed him as merely an ordinary partner, brazenly pursuing others he deemed more desirable. Ethan's heart secretly swelled with satisfaction, though he maintained a facade of polite indifference. He approached Julian, his voice smooth and understated. "Julian, hello," Ethan said. "What I mean is, have you ever considered a different partner?" Julian's eyes widened, a delicate blush spreading across his fair cheeks. His soft, full lips pressed together as he unconsciously took a small step back. Ethan's commanding presence, subtle yet undeniable, seemed to envelop him, drawing Julian into the man's deep, almost cosmic gaze. Julian gently averted his head, his fingers tracing the rim of his champagne flute. He inquired what exactly Mr. Vance was implying. Ethan lightly placed a hand on Julian's shoulder, subtly guiding his gaze toward Brendan, who was engrossed in flattering another conventionally attractive young man across the room. Ethan struggled to mask his internal excitement, maintaining a composed expression while uttering a daring proposition. He murmured in Julian's ear, his voice a captivating whisper, that Brendan was behaving disgracefully. Ethan asserted that he was more handsome, more affluent, and would cherish Julian far more, suggesting Julian might consider letting him be the one by his side. Ethan added, listing his assets, that he had a formidable physique, several properties, multiple businesses, luxury vehicles, and an impressive capacity for devotion. He noted with satisfaction the slight tremor in Julian's fair, soft earlobe, slowly tinged with pink. Julian cast a sharp glance at Ethan, then quickly headed towards his nominal husband. Those wide, innocent eyes were utterly charming. Ethan clutched his chest, feeling his heart pound with an endearing flutter. Not until Julian's slender figure disappeared from view did Ethan lower his gaze, inhaling the faint, lingering scent Julian had left behind. He admitted to himself that his actions might seem intense, but Julian was not just anyone. He was someone worth fighting for. Morality, Ethan pondered, could it truly outweigh the importance of securing a connection like this? After the gala concluded, Ethan, unable to locate Julian, decided to direct his attention to Brendan Shaw. Ethan asked Brendan how things had been going lately, forcing a friendly, gentle smile, though his piercing gaze felt like a razor, eager to dissect the man before him. Brendan, oblivious, believed he was being acknowledged by a superior. He began to boast about his recent professional accomplishments with evident self-importance. Despite being a junior employee at the company, he spoke as if the entire operation would cease to function without his invaluable contribution. Ethan's gaze softened, a predatory glint in his eyes. With such an easily manipulated rival, he mused, winning Julian's affection would be no arduous task. Soon, Brendan's conversation shifted to Julian, his expression a mix of disdain and impatience, embodying a remarkably self-important attitude. He complained that his partner at home was bothersome, constantly interrupting his work, either serving him food or offering him drinks, as if Brendan needed such trivial reminders. Ethan's hand slammed down on the table with a startling thud, his eyes ablaze with indignation. He thought aloud, wondering how such an unappreciative man could possess such a beautiful partner without cherishing him. He asserted that if Julian were his, he would ensure Julian's every comfort and happiness. Brendan flinched at the sudden noise, taking a few seconds to process the situation before a look of dawning comprehension spread across his face. Brendan asked Mr. Vance if he also thought Julian was being unreasonable, then added that he was actually planning to divorce Julian because he had fallen for another person. Unreasonable? You mean your neighbor's unreasonable approach to marital commitment? Ethan thought, but caught himself. Wait. Ethan's gaze, which had been burning with fury, abruptly shifted back to a look of benevolent amiability. He even found himself slapping Brendan heartily on the back, watching him wince in pain. A good man, Ethan thought, where could one find such an accommodating rival? He realized he wouldn't need to resort to complex tactics. Brendan was effectively dismantling his own relationship. Brendan, having talked himself hoarse, never received the offer of a drink. He eventually left the office crestfallen. As soon as Brendan closed the door, Ethan furtively peered from behind the office blinds, watching Brendan rub his sore shoulder while complaining to colleagues. Brendan was heard saying that Mr. Vance had complimented his intelligence and enjoyed hearing about company matters, but that his boss had a heavy hand and got a bit too enthusiastic when excited. Ethan frowned, seething silently behind a large potted plant. He muttered that if Brendan were smart, there wouldn't be a single dullard in the company, and his heavy-handedness was entirely intentional. Brendan prattled on about himself for a good while, eventually returning to his desk amidst the barely concealed exasperation of his coworkers. Ethan was filled with a simmering resentment, unable to believe that Julian had married such a misguided and self-important fool. He silently vowed to rescue his beautiful and vulnerable Julian from this pathetic excuse for a partner. Vance Industries, known for its generous salaries and excellent benefits, frequently organized company social events. Ethan, who had previously abstained from such gatherings, now made a point of joining, subtly maneuvering himself close to Brendan to gather information about Julian. The dim, pulsating lights and cacophonous music of the upscale lounge usually irritated him, but what truly irked him was Brendan's transparently fawning demeanor. Brendan's face was contorted into an ingratiating smile as he solicitously served drinks to a conventionally attractive young man nearby, holding and kissing his hand repeatedly, spouting a torrent of saccharine endearments. Brendan gushed that the young man was lovely, that his partner at home couldn't compare, and that he would do anything for him. These fragmented declarations nauseated Ethan, making him wish he could physically intervene. The young man, flattered by Brendan's attention, raised an eyebrow and chuckled, playfully patting Brendan's cheek as if he were an amusing diversion. The young man suggested that if he asked Brendan to get a divorce. Brendan hesitated for a moment, then responded that he would absolutely be willing to divorce Julian, but given they had only been married for 2 months, it might not look good. The young man stated that if Brendan divorced Julian, he would be his boyfriend. Brendan no longer wavered, gazing at the young man with infatuated devotion, nodding enthusiastically. Someone nearby, disgusted by Brendan's abject display, interjected, reminding Brendan that he and Julian were supposedly childhood sweethearts, and questioning how he could behave this way. Brendan impatiently cut him off, asserting that he would never have married an ordinary partner if his parents hadn't pressured him. He declared that people naturally seek better prospects, implying Julian wasn't a desirable match. Later, a visibly inebriated Brendan hailed a cab home. Ethan, after a moment of consideration, followed in his discreet Porsche. The moon had retreated behind the clouds, and the distant streetlights cast a faint glow. Ethan watched Brendan kick open his front door and swagger inside. A cacophony of banging and crashing soon followed, punctuated by merciless insults. Brendan was heard to declare that Julian was useless, and that if his family hadn't lent Julian's mother money 6 months ago, she'd be dead by now. He screamed at Julian to get out, divorce him, and stop bothering him. Ethan's brow furrowed, his anger consuming all reason. He thought, Brendan, how dare he? He felt an overwhelming urge to go inside and confront him, to show Brendan who was truly the bothersome one. The late autumn wind was sharp and unforgiving. Ethan abruptly pushed open his car door. As he hurried forward, he saw a slender figure standing near the entrance. Julian stood with his head bowed, quietly sobbing amidst the mournful wail of the wind. His beautiful eyes glistened with tears as he unconsciously moved forward, like a lost kitten searching for home. Ethan felt a pang in his chest, a prickling ache spreading through him. Julian, get in the car, Ethan commanded. Julian met Ethan's gaze, then tightened his grip on his phone, remaining rooted to the spot without a word. Ethan noticed Julian's thin clothing and trembling eyelashes, and his rationality slowly returned. He cursed himself inwardly as he stepped out of the car, thinking that Julian was at his most vulnerable and he had spoken so harshly. He chastised himself, "You useless man. Not only are you failing to win him over, but you don't even know how to console someone." He resolved to rectify this deficiency. Ethan gently draped his jacket over Julian's shoulders. Looking at that fair, delicate face, he felt an unfamiliar nervousness. His usually eloquent and decisive voice stumbled, forming incoherent phrases. He explained that what he meant was, he wanted to know where Julian would like to go, and he could take him. He apologized for sounding harsh, saying it had worried him to see Julian so lightly dressed, and he genuinely cared. He added that he wasn't trying to disparage Brendan, but he truly wasn't a good husband, leaving Julian out there late at night. As he continued, Ethan regained his composure, unabashedly promoting himself. He explained that he was different. Handsome, honorable, fit, and immensely capable, devoted solely to Julian. He added that all his wealth would be Julian's, and if he were ever disloyal, he would forfeit everything. His impassioned declaration, carried on the crisp night air, startled several birds from their slumber, sending them fluttering into the distance. Their indignant chirps seemed to accuse the man of disturbing their peaceful rest. Julian's cheeks flushed. He gently grasped Ethan's hand, telling him he didn't need to swear. Ethan, his hand held by Julian's soft, slender fingers, couldn't help but smile, his gaze becoming even more tender. He decided to employ a playful tactic his friends had suggested, blinking innocently and softly coaxing Julian. He said there was no swearing, and since it was cold out, they should talk in the car as it was late and he would take Julian home. "Home," Julian murmured, lowering his gaze, a hint of sadness clouding his expression. He nodded subtly. Ethan solicitously opened the car door for Julian. Then, like someone presenting a prized treasure, found a box of artisanal chocolates and a bottle of sparkling water, offering them to Julian. Outwardly, he maintained a composed, almost aloof demeanor, only discreetly glancing at Julian in the rearview mirror. Internally, however, he was awash in a flurry of romantic notions. When they arrived at Julian's apartment building, Ethan reluctantly watched Julian's figure disappear around the corner. He wished he could have walked Julian to his door, seen him safely inside. He wished he could have gone in for a cup of tea, chatted with Julian about everything from poetry to life's grand aspirations, from financial secrets to personal attributes. He wished he could have boldly presented himself, offering his identification, bank cards, property deeds, driver's license, everything to Julian, inviting him to take complete control. Even if Julian were to demand an exorbitant amount of effort from him, he would never refuse. He, a leading figure, was simply that dedicated. Alas, there were no such if-onlys. Julian, though appreciative of the gesture, had politely declined his offer, coolly departing. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the office early, waiting. A disheveled and weary Brendan Shaw barely stepped through the doors before Ethan promptly ushered him into his office. Ethan offered a thin, insincere smile, then silently subjected Brendan to a critical, discerning gaze, scanning him from head to toe. This scrutiny left Brendan bewildered and trembling. Ethan inquired if Brendan enjoyed physical activity. Brendan looked up, meeting Ethan's knowing gaze, sensing a hint of danger. He replied that he occasionally played badminton and swam. "Excellent. I knew you'd also appreciate boxing, wrestling, judo, Muay Thai, and kickboxing," Ethan declared. He suggested they train together during their breaks and offered to double Brendan's salary. Ethan's expression was so earnest and guileless that Brendan, before fully comprehending, found himself nodding in agreement under Ethan's insistent hand on his head. As he watched Ethan's smiling face, Brendan shivered, a chilling premonition that things were not as simple as they seemed. Thwack! Brendan felt a sharp pain in his abdomen, his legs giving way as he crumpled to the floor. "Ah, Brendan, are you all right?" Ethan exclaimed, feigning concern. "I barely used any strength. I didn't realize you were so fragile. My apologies, I'll be gentler next time." Crack! Brendan gasped, clutching his stinging shoulder. "Good heavens, Brendan, are you injured?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with false worry. "I was just trying out a new move." "You absolutely must tell me if you can't keep up." Whomp! Brendan tumbled awkwardly twice, landing on his back and staring up at the ceiling, resembling a bewildered fish out of water. Ethan solicitously helped him up, signaling to the private doctor standing by to administer aid. Ethan told Brendan he had truly pushed himself today, and that he didn't know his own strength sometimes. He urged the doctor to check Brendan over right away, adding that they could continue tomorrow. Brendan, just having been helped to his feet, heard this and his legs buckled again, sending him back to his knees, his eyes wide with confusion and disbelief. He stammered, asking if they had to train again tomorrow. Ethan replied with an innocent expression that of course they would. He explained that individuals like them needed to maintain excellent physical condition to win the hearts of their beloveds, and they couldn't abandon their training halfway. Ethan called Brendan one of the most prominent figures in the company, saying they simply must persevere. He offered to double, no, triple Brendan's salary. Ethan wasn't lying. Brendan was indeed one of the most prominently annoying figures. Brendan, watching the doctor carefully apply medicine and Ethan's earnest face, was overwhelmed with mixed emotions. Brendan told Mr. Vance he had no idea he held him in such high regard, and agreed to keep going. Ethan beamed at him with an approving gaze, then mercilessly unleashed another powerful punch. A bruised and battered Brendan staggered out of the office, walking with an unsteady gait. Ethan pulled out his phone, sending his 17th message of the day to Julian. "Julian, I just finished my workout. Heading to shower now. Wanna see my abs? Cute bunny sending flowers." JPEG. Julian's reply read, "Mr. Vance. No need. Julian, my name is Ethan Vance. You can call me Ethan, or even Honey, if you like. No need to be formal," Ethan messaged back. Abs pic JPEG close-up face pic. JPEG. Mr. Vance. I need to get back to my painting. Goodbye. Shy bunny. JPEG. Ethan stared at the blushing bunny emoji, recalling Julian's shyly demure expression at the gala. His heart swelled, and he felt a surge of energy, eager to drag Brendan back for another 100 rounds. Unfortunately, the principle of sustainable development compelled him to abandon that idea. He sighed, admitting to himself that he truly was a considerate and responsible individual. He spent a fulfilling and contented period engaged in daily sparring. Work hours were dedicated to company affairs, breaks to sparring with Brendan, and every spare moment to messaging Julian. Brendan, to Ethan's secret delight, became increasingly resilient to the daily friendly contact with his fists. Ethan later realized he might have made a tactical error. This fellow, Brendan, was so caught up in the beatings that he seemed to have forgotten the main objective. What about divorcing Julian, as he'd promised? A man of his standing couldn't possibly be seen as interfering in someone else's marriage. He, a principled man, would never intrude. No, wait, pursuing Julian couldn't be considered interfering in another's relationship. Brendan constantly spoke ill of Julian, clamoring to find his true love and openly pursuing other conventionally desirable individuals. Even if there was a tiny, minuscule spark of affection left between them, Ethan wouldn't care. He would treat Julian well, showing him how good things could be. That was enough. A pang of possessiveness tightened Ethan's chest, yet he couldn't resist opening Julian's chat window again. He had already exchanged over 100 messages with Julian that day. Julian surely wouldn't mind a few more, would he? That annoying Brendan. Why hadn't he divorced his sweet, beautiful, talented Julian yet? If Ethan were successfully in Julian's life, he wouldn't worry about sending too many messages. He would surely video call Julian every day, seeing his fair, smiling face, kissing his soft, rosy lips, gently stroking his dark, smooth hair, embracing his slender, strong waist. "It's fine," Ethan reassured himself. Even if Brendan stubbornly refused to divorce, as long as Julian was willing, Ethan would always be there, ready to serve Julian in any way. Ding dong. Julian's message appeared on his phone. "Ethan, would you like to go to an art exhibition? A friend gave me 2 tickets." Ethan's heart pounded with excitement, his hands trembling slightly. He quickly typed a reply. "Julian, yes. My love, I'd be delighted." As a self-proclaimed sophisticated and decisive individual, Ethan admitted he wasn't particularly artistically inclined. So, when Julian's amber-clear eyes looked at him, he felt a rare moment of self-consciousness. Julian asked Ethan which painting he liked best. "All of them," Ethan replied, maintaining his composure, as if everything was under his control. "Really? What do you think of this one?" Julian pressed. Ethan described the painting, saying it depicted a beautiful landscape, expressed the artist's powerful emotions, and communicated a profound idea. Julian was silent for 2 seconds, his bright eyes full of amusement. His thick, long eyelashes fluttered, sweeping against Ethan's heart with each blink. He gently poked Ethan's cheek, then, blushing, turned his head shyly to gaze at a distant artwork. Julian teased Ethan, asking if he was doing a literary analysis, noting his rigidity. Ethan shook his head, gently taking Julian's hand and playfully swinging it. He said that as long as Julian was willing to listen, he'd be happy to do literary analysis for him for a lifetime. "You, what kind of thing is that to say?" Julian's cheeks flushed, but he tightened his grip on Ethan's warm, broad hand, allowing Ethan to keep swinging their clasped hands. Ethan's gaze wandered from Julian's thick, soft dark hair to his fair, elegant neck, from his refined features to his rosy lips. He felt as if he had reached the zenith of his existence. With such a beautiful, captivating partner, what more could he possibly desire? In truth, humans are the most avaricious of creatures. After several dates, Ethan timidly snuggled closer to Julian, pleading for recognition of their relationship. "Julian, my darling, when will you divorce him? Grant me a proper place in your life. I long to be openly with you," Ethan said, blinking innocently, hoping to elicit Julian's sympathy. A flicker of sly amusement passed through Julian's beautiful eyes. His slender fingers pressed against Ethan's lips, then slid down to his chest, igniting a fervent heat within Ethan. But in the next instant, Ethan felt a sudden chill. Julian stated he wouldn't be divorcing Brendan just yet. Ethan quickly grasped Julian's hand. He asked why, and if he wasn't good enough, or if there was anything that displeased Julian, he would change it immediately. Julian shook his head, his eyes sparkling with amusement. He said Ethan was wonderful and it was his own issue. Ethan's heart sank. He asked if Julian still had feelings for Brendan. Julian's beautiful eyes widened slightly. His pale, delicate hand gently slapped Ethan's face, leaving Ethan utterly spellbound. Julian laughed, asking how Ethan could even suggest that. Inhaling Julian's intoxicating scent, Ethan pondered for a moment, then arrived at an epiphany. He asked if it could be that Julian had certain preferences, darling. He added that it was all right, and if Julian enjoyed it, he was willing to indulge him. Ethan presented a look of profound understanding, which only left Julian bewildered. "Enjoy what?" Julian inquired. Ethan stated that he understood completely and respected Julian's inclinations. But for Julian's sake, he refused to elaborate, his gaze growing only more tender and devoted. He felt an immense sense of duty and commitment. Even if Julian had a passion for unconventional scenarios, he would readily fulfill them. After all, Julian was so captivating. He told himself that once he had immersed himself in 100 gigabytes of instructional material online, he would be able to satisfy his darling in any situation, in any scenario, ensuring his absolute contentment. Ethan and Julian's days were filled with sweet moments. They exchanged hundreds of messages daily. To find amusing gossip to entertain Julian, Ethan frequented the company's internal chat groups, where he stumbled upon numerous complaints about his former rival. Brendan has been looking so disheveled lately, wearing the same crumpled clothes over and over again. One message read, "That's not all," another added, "It's winter now, and he's still wearing just a trench coat. What's he trying to prove? I heard he was hospitalized, and no one went to visit him." He was apparently furious. Didn't that person he was pursuing go? Oh, that one has high standards. Brendan's just a sycophant, you know. As a magnanimous current partner, upon seeing Brendan in such a pitiful state, Ethan naturally shared the news with Julian immediately. He and Julian spent a delightful half-hour on the phone before Julian, with a gentle reminder, prompted him to return to his official duties. He couldn't help it. Julian was simply that thoughtful. With such a wonderful partner, Ethan felt compelled to strive for even greater success. After concluding his work, Ethan, in his capacity as CEO, generously allowed himself to leave half an hour early. As he pushed open his apartment door, his beautiful Julian, with a slight pout, rushed into his arms. Julian asked Ethan to look at something, handing him his phone. Ethan saw a message from Brendan. "Julian, we're not divorced yet. You're coming to the company retreat with me." Julian, frowning, poked Ethan's well-defined abs and complained about Brendan's strange behavior. Ethan admitted that for a split second he felt a flicker of jealousy. Jealousy that Brendan could still, however inappropriately, claim a connection to Julian. But as a generous, gentle, mature, and rational individual, he quickly reframed his thoughts. Considering a particular possibility, his gaze became intense, even revealing a hint of excitement as he looked at Julian. Julian tilted his head, a little confused, asking Ethan if he wanted him to go. Ethan, thinking of Julian's special preferences and the favorable conditions of the company retreat, nodded enthusiastically. Julian was perhaps too shy to voice his desires, but Ethan understood. He planned to create various scenarios, perhaps even some role-playing. He was certain he could make Julian overwhelmingly happy. He added that company retreats were excellent, often featuring luxurious hot tubs and opportunities for fine dining. Julian nodded, agreeing that if his partner wished to go, he would accompany him, for he adored this affectionate man. Ethan imagined the hazy atmosphere of the hot tubs, Julian's rosy, tempting lips and snow-white skin after a bath. He immediately began excitedly preparing a multitude of items. Various costumes? Check. Prop fragrances? Check. He thought about what else, then decided to take everything. He was fully equipped and ready, only waiting for the perfect moment to share a wonderful night with Julian. Unfortunately, someone always seemed to pop up to spoil the mood. Upon arriving at the luxury spa resort, Ethan immediately heard Brendan's obsequious voice. Brendan was heard to gush about the young man's flawless skin, saying his ordinary partner couldn't even compare. And when he arrived, he would show him what true beauty looked like. Show him what? Ethan retorted, suppressing his anger. The surrounding crowd quickly parted, creating a path. Ethan calmly walked towards Brendan and the attractive young man. He raised an eyebrow and continued his inquiry. He asked what amazing spectacle they were talking about, and asked them to let him see it too. Brendan met Ethan's dark eyes and cold query, momentarily speechless. The young man beside him trembled, patting Brendan's shoulder, urging him to speak. Someone from the brave onlookers dared to answer. "Mr. Vance," the onlooker said. Brendan was just talking about his partner at home, saying he wasn't as lovely as Mr. Kim, indicating the individual standing beside Brendan. Mr. Kim, usually admired at the company, now quivered with fear, vigorously nudging the silent Brendan. Mr. Kim urged Brendan to say something, noting he was usually so full of sweet talk and asking why he couldn't explain himself now, since Mr. Vance was asking. Brendan stood frozen, utterly bewildered. Julian took a few steps forward, joining Ethan's side, and met Brendan's gaze. Julian asked Brendan if he was talking about him. Julian's face, radiant as a blooming peach, was now tinged with a delicate blush. His fair, smooth skin was like precious jade. His clear, sparkling eyes shone, and his rosy, tender lips were like spring blossoms, utterly captivating. The crowd stood stunned, quickly exchanging glances and whispering amongst themselves. They murmured about Julian's lack of certain defining physical traits, confirming him as an ordinary partner, but noted this was not what the rumors had said. One person remembered Julian as the stunning person from the gala, saying they had searched everywhere for him and couldn't find him, realizing now he was Brendan's husband. Another wondered if this was the plain and unremarkable partner Brendan talked about, suggesting Brendan needed his eyes checked. And probably his head too, to have such a breathtaking beauty at home and still go out chasing others. Brendan felt the gossiping stares of those around him, his face burning hot. He took a ragged breath, seeming to revert to his arrogant self in front of Julian. Brendan told Julian he had brought him here today precisely to show him who a truly beautiful person was. He claimed Julian's appearance wasn't exceptional, and since he was just an ordinary partner, they were simply not compatible. He declared that when they got back, they were getting a divorce. Ethan stepped forward, ready to grab Brendan by the collar and throw him out, but Julian's response stopped him cold. "All right, we'll get divorced," Julian said. "Wait, Julian agreed to divorce?" He said, "Yes. I'm going to have a proper relationship." Ethan's anger instantly evaporated. He looked at Julian with bright puppy dog eyes. Julian smiled, nodding, and took Ethan's wrist, leading him away from the crowd. Ethan's heart was doing 1,000 somersaults, but he forced himself to maintain a serene expression. Taking the initiative, he wrapped an arm around Julian's slender waist, his fingers restlessly caressing Julian's soft, delicate skin. The whispers behind them were ignored. Even Brendan's furious shouts were forgotten. With such warmth and softness in his embrace, Ethan's mind went blank. All he knew was to manage his expression and avoid foolishly grinning. The phone rang as Ethan was entangled with Julian in their private hot tub, stealing kisses. The milky white water accentuated Julian's snow-white skin. Ethan gently gathered Julian's spread-out dark hair, drawing breath from his lips. Julian, his cheeks flushed, gasped, using his slender, pale hand to poke Ethan's firm chest. Julian told Ethan his phone was ringing. Ethan, inhaling Julian's captivating scent, lovingly kissed his forehead. "I'll get it." He glanced at the caller ID, an eyebrow subtly rising, a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. Things are falling into place. He had been wondering how to fulfill Julian's particular preferences, and Brendan had just delivered the perfect opportunity. Brendan, he thought, not only a foolish yet effective ex, but also the most suitable accomplice. He resolved to give Brendan a double bonus later. He answered the call. Brendan's acerbic, telling Julian not to dream of soaring to greater heights, resonated from the phone. Ethan shrugged, turned the volume to its lowest setting, and tossed the phone onto the bedside table. Seeing that Ethan was taking his time, Julian, having dried his hair, walked into the bedroom area of the hot tub suite. Julian asked Ethan who that was. Ethan's ardent gaze swept over Julian's flushed cheeks, and he couldn't help but smile faintly. He pulled Julian's slender, firm waist closer, kissing his soft, rosy lips. Slow down. This is too much," Julian murmured. On the other end of the line, Brendan, hearing the faint sounds, felt a sudden chill, as if he had plunged into an icy abyss. Brendan's desperate shouts, though muffled, still carried through the phone, becoming a barely audible backdrop, asking Julian what he was doing and how he could behave this way. After their kiss, Julian gasped for air, looking at Ethan with a curious expression as Ethan once again picked up the phone. "Brendan, you've been replaced," Ethan declared. "Now I'm the one Julian loves most." Julian's beautiful eyes widened, his fair cheeks flushed with color. The call was still active. Brendan continued to shriek, asking Mr. Vance why his voice was on the phone, and demanding to speak to Julian. Ethan pursed his lips, then unceremoniously hung up. Despite having mentally prepared himself, he still preferred that others not hear Julian's voice. He looked up, meeting Julian's tender gaze. Julian gently told Ethan he didn't have to be like this. He stated he didn't love Brendan. Not in the past, not now, not ever, and that Ethan was the only one he loved. Ethan hummed. Though he wasn't entirely sure why Julian was suddenly consoling him, he was still overjoyed. He took Julian's hand and kissed it repeatedly. He told Julian he also didn't want anyone else hearing their voices, and if Julian liked this, they could role-play saying, "Madam, you wouldn't want your husband to know about this, would you? Now be a good girl." Julian hastily covered Ethan's mouth with his hand, a blush spreading from his cheeks to his earlobes, which trembled adorably. Julian asked what Ethan was talking about, asking when he had ever said he liked that and calling him too much. You don't like this, my love?" Ethan asked, feigning disappointment. "I thought this was your preference. I even made special preparations." He pulled out a suitcase, revealing it was crammed with uniforms, props, and various suggestive items. He asked if these were all for nothing, then Julian's gaze swept over the blush-inducing contents of the suitcase, then settled on Ethan's sparkling eyes. "No, not for nothing. Come on, let's try them all." Ethan's eyes lit up with excitement. He joyfully picked up Julian. "Wait, Ethan. It's daytime now. We shouldn't waste the daytime. I want to see you." Julian protested. "Stop it. Let's wait until after the retreat ends." Under Ethan's eager prompting, Julian and Brendan successfully divorced. Ethan finally received the formal recognition from Julian he craved: 2 crisp marriage certificates. Brendan, after returning home, was disoriented and listless. Fearing further retaliation from Ethan, he hastily submitted his resignation. Ambitious but lacking real ability, he submitted countless resumes to various companies but never secured a satisfactory position, eventually fading from Ethan and Julian's lives. Ethan winked innocently at Julian, signaling his blamelessness. He claimed he wasn't that petty and was actually going to give Brendan a raise. Julian playfully pinched Ethan's cheek, asking who cared about Brendan, and saying he wasn't important. Exactly, Ethan agreed, nodding obediently, his mischievous hand subtly wrapping around Julian's waist. He told Julian they had 3 times yesterday, and no chance today. He promised, "My darling, my sweet love, I will take good care of you. My art exhibition opens tomorrow, and no times today. My dearest, my love, I'll be gentle. I promise it won't affect you." Before encountering Ethan Vance, Julian Reed had never imagined he would love someone so deeply. Like countless ordinary individuals, he had followed the conventional path of education, striving to earn a living and build a better future with his own hands. Unfortunately, his mother's serious illness shattered his dreams. His family couldn't afford the surgery. Witnessing his father's constant sorrow and his mother's resignation, Julian unhesitatingly agreed to the request of Mr. and Mrs. Shaw to marry their son, Brendan. He was genuinely grateful for the Shaw family's assistance. Nothing was more important than his mother's life. The Shaw and Reed families had been neighbors for over a decade. Julian tried to comfort himself, thinking Brendan wasn't bad, and they could at least be called childhood friends. Indeed, before they developed their distinct personalities, their relationship had been good. Back then, Brendan, though somewhat proud, didn't look down on others, nor did he believe himself to be the most superior person in the world. Sadly, the straightforward young man was intoxicated by his newfound sense of importance, dismissing his ordinary childhood friend and constantly dreaming of marrying someone he considered a trophy partner. Mr. and Mrs. Shaw, fully aware of their son's limitations, used their connections to secure Brendan a position at Vance Industries. They also leveraged Julian's mother's medical expenses to arrange the marriage. Julian was a dependable and capable young man with a striking appearance. Mr. and Mrs. Shaw hoped he could guide Brendan back onto a sensible path and that they would settle down together. Brendan reluctantly married, harboring resentment but unable to express it to his parents. Consequently, he subjected Julian to daily verbal abuse and openly courted other conventionally desirable individuals at the company. Julian, grateful for the Shaw family's kindness, endured Brendan's behavior. Even though Brendan found him distasteful and refused to consummate their marriage for months, Julian didn't mind. He knew Brendan looked down on him and that their divorce was inevitable. He planned to slowly save money to repay the surgery fees to the Shaw family as quickly as possible. Julian longed for his freedom. Ethan Vance's appearance, in Julian's view, was a beautiful accident. The moment he saw him at the gala, Julian recognized him. Brendan frequently complained about Ethan Vance's achievements with jealous and resentful tones, allowing Julian to piece together the image of a clever, capable, and honorable man from Brendan's numerous rants. No one could dislike such an individual, and Julian was no exception. Ethan was the kind of person Julian had always aspired to be, someone who steered their own destiny. Since marrying Brendan, he felt he had drifted further and further from that goal. Yet, whenever he recalled those deep, beautiful dark eyes, Julian felt an infinite surge of motivation. Julian scoffed at his own wishful thinking. Such a person was too far beyond his reach. Even Brendan, a man of limited perspective, looked down on him for being an ordinary partner. How could Ethan Vance, a truly prominent figure, genuinely fall for him? Julian convinced himself that Ethan was merely toying with him, simply looking to flirt with a beautiful person at a party. Julian ignored his inner turmoil, forcibly suppressing his emotions. But he hadn't anticipated that in his most vulnerable and helpless moment, he would see those eyes again. Julian listened as Ethan Vance rambled on, introducing himself and showering him with endless sweet talk. He wanted to tell himself to stay away from such a dominant figure, yet inexplicably, he found himself in the car, drawing comfort from the man's warm jacket and subtle presence. Ethan Vance's stolen glances in the rearview mirror were painfully obvious. He thought he was being discreet, but his direct gaze made Julian involuntarily smile. At the community entrance, Julian declined Ethan's offer to walk him to his door, instantly receiving a pitiful, puppy dog look. How could such a formidable man be so prone to pouting? Julian coldly turned away, walking quickly to the corner and stopping where he could no longer be seen by Ethan. Julian gently pressed his hand to his chest, his clear eyes sparkling, feeling the intense pounding beneath his palm. To use such a perfect and handsome face to act adorable. It's just too unfair. The pale moonlight fell upon the ground, illuminating Julian's flushed cheeks and bright eyes. Tonight, something felt different. Brendan seemed determined to divorce, throwing tantrums and arguing with his parents. Mr. and Mrs. Shaw felt a sense of guilt but were helpless with their son. They eventually arranged a dinner where Mrs. Shaw held Julian's hand while instructing Mr. Shaw to once again impress upon Brendan the importance of respectful behavior. Amidst Brendan's pained yelps, Mrs. Shaw apologetically addressed Julian on Brendan's behalf. She said the marriage proposal had come from their family, and it was entirely their fault that Brendan had treated Julian so poorly. However, she noted that since they had only been married for 2 months, separating now would look bad. She suggested they wait another month, allowing more time to pass. Julian met Mrs. Shaw's hopeful gaze and nodded, his lips pressed together. He then produced a bank card. "Auntie, this is the money for the surgery. I've rounded it up and deposited it into this card," Julian stated. "Child, we're family. Why talk about money?" Mrs. Shaw demurred. Julian offered a demure smile, uttering a few pleasantries, though his heart remained unaffected. Mrs. Shaw declined a few times, then tucked the bank card into her purse. Brendan, limping and grimacing, snorted dismissively and left the private dining room without a backward glance. Julian looked at the untouched food, feeling unusually weary. Mr. and Mrs. Shaw hoped to use that month to persuade their son to reconcile with Julian. But now, it wasn't just Brendan who wanted a divorce. Julian did too. A notification sound on his phone dispersed Julian's low spirits. A smile unconsciously formed on his lips. Only one person was so tirelessly and persistently promoting himself at this hour: Ethan Vance. Sure enough, message after message popped up, occasionally adorned with adorable emojis, finally topped with an effortlessly candid selfie that subtly showcased his impressive physique. Julian gazed at the man's smiling eyes and subtly curved lips in the photo, his fingers trembling slightly. For the first time, he extended an invitation. "Ethan, would you like to go to an art exhibition? A friend gave me 2 tickets. Julian, yes. My love, I'd be delighted. Julian enjoyed Ethan Vance's playful demeanor and affectionate displays. He knew the man wasn't a fragile creature, yet he couldn't help but make exceptions for his charming antics again and again. At the art exhibition, watching the man's earnest concentration, Julian suddenly felt a mischievous impulse, wanting to playfully tease the usually bold individual. He paused for a moment, then his slender fingers pressed against Ethan's lips, sliding down to his chest. "I'm not divorcing him," yet Julian revealed. Julian intended to let Ethan whine a bit before telling him the truth. But to his surprise, Ethan Vance seemed to have misunderstood something entirely, and no matter how Julian pressed, Ethan refused to elaborate. Julian looked at the thoughtful man, a smile playing on his lips. "It's fine," he thought. Only 1 more month and he would be free. 1 more month and he could officially be with his beloved. Ethan Vance was the most brilliant flower in his life, his companion through all future storms. They had plenty of time. They would clarify everything.